Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we're going to be discussing the Miami Hurricanes' dominance over the Florida Gators this past weekend. The final score was 26-7. However, this game, despite it being really close late, it was not as close as the score indicated. I mean, if we just look at the team stats, you'll figure out really quickly why I say that. The Gators only managed 7 first downs, and more importantly, they were 0 of 13. I'll repeat that again. 0 of 13 on third down conversions. They had a total of 141 yards. Miami had 160 yards with a struggling Carson Beck and 184 rushing yards for a total of 344. So on both sides of the ball, they eclipsed UF's total yards for the game. They did lose the turnover battle with Carson Beck throwing the interception, but the main takeaway is that Miami dominated on both lines of scrimmage, which is, again, what Mario Cristobal envisioned when he took this job. He's been very clear since day one, and you can see it in his coaching style. The man believes if you can dominate on the offensive line and defensive line, it will translate to championship football. And again, this was a game where Carson Beck was clearly struggling, 17 of 30 for 160 yards and 1 interception. And it did not matter. To be honest, the only reason why it was close is because Carson Beck was struggling. And they were still able to pull out a 26-7 victory. Mark Fletcher had 24 carries for 116 yards and a touchdown. Jamar Brown had 18 for 80 with 2 touchdowns. And man, oh man, that defensive line. Ruben Bain, 7 tackles, half a sack, a tackle for loss. It's a monster towards the end. It's incredible to see when you need the defensive line to step up. You saw it at the end of the Notre Dame game, and you saw it in the final drive of this game. How much Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain were just dominating that line of scrimmage. They finished with 4 sacks overall, 7 tackles for losses. Xavier Lucas had a half a tackle for loss. Marquise Lightfoot had a sack and a tackle for loss. Keontae Scott had half a tackle for loss. Akeem Mesidor had half a sack, half a tackle for loss. Jacoby Thomas, a sack and 1.5 tackles for loss. David Blay, half a tackle. Wesley Bissain, half a tackle for loss. Mo Torre, a sack and a tackle for loss. I mean, this defense was swarming. This UF offense could not do anything. DJ Lagway was 12-23 for 61 yards. They averaged 2.7 yards on each completion. Slightly better, ever so slightly, was their rushing at 2.8 yards a carry. Now, I'll give credit where credit's due. Florida's defense did everything in their power to keep them in this game, but eventually the bully ball won through. This is exactly what we're talking about with the Miami Hurricanes and the schedule laid out in front of them. You let Notre Dame come back in the game a little bit, and you made it close. But overall, you pretty much dominated that game as well. You had the cupcake in Bethune, and you had the ranked matchup against South Florida where they demolished them 49-12. The key game is 2 weeks from now at Florida State. Could possibly be a top 5 matchup, but it should be a top 10 as long as FSU takes care of business this Friday against Virginia. And other than that, I mean, after that game, you've got another bye week, which is crazy to me. Then you face Louisville, which should be a tough game, but you should be able to handle that. Stanford, that should be an easy game. The SMU game is not looking as hard as it did at the beginning of the season. You can see UM dominating, again, both lines of scrimmage there. And that'll play out how it should with a UM victory. You got Syracuse, who's putting up a decent fight, but they lost their starting quarterback, I believe, for the year. He messed up his Achilles. So that shouldn't be as daunting as it was before in the sense of Syracuse just upset Clemson, which we'll discuss in a different podcast, how they've fallen off the map. NC State, solid team, but nothing that should handle. Virginia Tech is in shambles. And then you got Pitt, should be a tough outing, but you should be able to handle that. This schedule is playing out for a historic season for Two of your three toughest tests are in the rearview mirror. And your final true test is coming up after a bye week. This is a time for the coaching staff to make sure everybody's healthy. Look at a lot of tape and make sure you're executing properly. Make no mistake about it, Tallahassee is going to be rocking. And it's going to be up to this coaching staff to make sure that they're able to handle that environment. And the good thing is, UM's not going to leave the state of Florida for a while. They don't really leave until November with SMU. So take advantage of how this schedule is playing out. And again, this is Mario Cristobal's dream. You have a second year in a row where you can lay claim to being the Sunshine State champs. If there's one thing this man loves to do, he loves to recruit. And he can clearly point, if they beat FSU, he can point at each elite recruit in the South, especially in the state of Florida. Look at what's going on in Florida. Billy Napier's done. We beat him 2 years in a row. God knows when we're going to face him, but they're not going to be looking to play us for a long time. And Florida State, they may be looking good to start off the season, but let's not forget they went 2-10 last year. Last year, we won double-digit games. On the flip side with the Gators, I've said it multiple times on this podcast, I think they are one of the most fascinating teams in the country. I've heard multiple pundits offer the idea of DJ Lagway redshirting, and I completely agree with it. I do not think it's a radical idea. For those of you who don't know, DJ Lagway suffered a shoulder injury, and he decided to rehab instead of opting for surgery. And then in the summer camps, he suffered a calf injury. This Florida offense, whether it falls completely on Billy Napier or not, and I do, again, when it comes to college kids, I do lean on coaching more than I do in professional. I do not think Billy Napier's helping this offense reach its potential. And there's a reason why there was a lot of unease coming into this season when Billy Napier said, I'm still going to be the offensive play caller, at least in Gator Nation. This team looks like there's no synergy across the offensive side of the ball. These wide receivers, tight ends, running backs coming out of the backfield, etc., they do not look like they have any chemistry with DJ because DJ hasn't been able to throw the ball in the quote-unquote offseason. They can't develop that chemistry with him because he wasn't available. This is going to be a lost season for the Gators. And it's going to be interesting because Billy Napier is going to get fired. They already did that rah-rah, save the coach's job last year with that solid finish to the season when they beat Ole Miss, LSU, Florida State. I don't think they're going to be able to do that again. You got Texas on October 4th. You got A&M on the 11th. Then you got that, what you would thought was an easy game in Mississippi State, and they're 4-0. Then you face Georgia, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Florida State. Folks, this team, it's in all likelihood, they're not even going to go bowling. Texas and Texas A&M are probably losses. Georgia's a loss. Ole Miss is a loss. Tennessee's a loss. Florida State's a loss. You're looking at Kentucky and Mississippi State as your likely wins. And that leaves you with 3 because South Florida was supposed to be a win. You were supposed to be 2-0 heading into the LSU game. And maybe 3-0, but in all likelihood 2-1 heading into the Miami game. Make no mistake about it, this is a daunting schedule, but that's life that you pick when you're in the SEC and you schedule certain out-of-conference games. That being said, I don't think Billy Napier is going to be head coach for long. I'll dive into on a different podcast where I believe I'm going to review the most disappointing teams of the season so far, and UF, despite in my preseason AP top 25 review, I thought they were overrated because I didn't think DJ Lagway would stay healthy. I still believe they are disappointing because DJ Lagway has played every single game. Now, whether he's fully healthy, that's a different discussion. That being said, and going back to Miami, again, if you're a Miami fan, I told you to revel in it last year because you had an exciting offense with Cam Ward and company, but you didn't have the defense to match. You brought in a new defensive coordinator. Ruben Bain's healthy. You brought in a new scheme, and this team is firing on all cylinders right now. Again, you get the bye week to rest up and completely focus on FSU. There's no trap game to worry about. It's not like you're looking at playing NC State this week or Louisville, and then you play Florida State. You got the bye week, and then you're going into hostile territory. These practices are going to be intense, and they're going to be incredibly hyper-focused because the key for this game, and we'll dive into it deeper, probably in a podcast with Eric or just in my preview overall of this matchup, the key is going to be discipline. In the same vein, if you watch the Texas Tech Utah game, Utah uses a lot of misdirections / movements with the wide receivers and running backs to kind of get your guys' eyes moving one way, and the play is going to happen a different direction. Gus Malzahn used similar tactics at FSU, and he has a lot of athletes this year, if you listen to my FSU pods, to play around with. UM is going to have to play very disciplined on defense to prevent FSU from getting those chunk plays. If you focus on that and prevent that from happening, you're going to force FSU to become a running team that gets bit by bit by bit, 3 yards in a cloud of dust sort of thing. Bit by bit by bit. If you prevent those quick strikes and Carson Beck has an efficient day, you should be able to win that game. The key this season is you are aware of your dominance on the offensive line and the defensive line this year with Ruben Bain healthy. Because again, people forget that he was injured in the first series or within a few plays of the first game last year. And I believe it was a soft tissue injury of some kind. And he wasn't healthy the whole year. And that made a huge difference because then you struggle getting pressure on the quarterback. And the back end of the defense was horrible. Now you have a healthy Ruben Bain. You had Akeem Mesidor come back. You got some young kids in the middle stepping up. You're seeing them sprinkle in other young kids like Marquise Lightfoot. The safeties are playing really solid this year. Xavier Lucas coming in at cornerback was another amazing pickup. He was a great player in Wisconsin, and he's a great player at UM right now. The only worry with this team right now is Carson Beck. Is he at 80%? Is he all the way there recovered from his surgery? Because this is the first time you look kind of worried with him. The running game looks great this season. The wide receivers have been a pleasant surprise because that's where you thought you would be in trouble. Shannon Dawson have really made sure that this team is going to allow their wide receivers to play in space and separate. And Malachi Tony reclassifying and being that young stud he is already. It's going to be fun to watch, folks. I believe Mario and the people who are currently on the staff, but some of the people who are in here from last year, understand the mistakes that they made and how to improve on them. And they will. They're not going to let this team falter in the way that last year's team did. You saw on the broadcast after they ran the ball in, Cristobal pounding his fist into his hand because he knows what type of team he has right now. This is a team that is going to bully everybody on their schedule. That is what the focus is right now. FSU is your last test, your last true test. I keep on saying that. However, they're not going to lose focus on the task at hand, because every game you're trying to improve because you're trying to make the playoffs. And the caliber of teams that you're going to face in the playoffs are going to be significantly different than about 2 or 3 of your opponents that are on your 12-game schedule. They're going to be significantly better than every single one of those opponents outside of 2 or 3 of them. You're going to have to be going up against the likes of Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, maybe LSU, Penn State. There's a lot of well-balanced teams. Even Texas. If you look at Texas, their defense is living up to the billing. It's just if the offense ever starts clicking, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. But even then, that defense is legitimate. Going up against Texas defense is going to be light years different than playing Virginia Tech. Going up against Ohio State's defense is going to be light years different than playing Stanford. That's what this coaching staff understands, and that's what they're going to drive home with this team. That being said, we're going to wrap this episode up, folks. A great win by the Miami Hurricanes program. Coming up this week, we're going to have some more pick'em games and just reviews of what we thought this sports weekend with Eric. I'll probably dive into the FSU game a little bit, but preview more of the Virginia game all in the same episode. And at some point, we're going to start doing a review of what we believe are the most disappointing teams so far in this college football season. That being said, you guys know the drill. You can find us on YouTube, 305 Insights. Subscribe to the channel, comment on the videos, like the videos, Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe there, rate us 5 stars. You can find us on Spotify as well. Wherever you're listening from, we appreciate it. And don't forget to turn those notifications on, so as soon as these episode drops, you can consume them as fast as possible. Thanks for stopping by, folks. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.